My fiancé's lawyer sent an outrageous prenup demanding I waive all rights. I politely refused to sign. She called off the wedding via text. My lawyer knew you weren't serious. I replied, interesting. Then I sued her for all non-refundable wedding deposits I'd paid. Her lawyer was stammering, calling mine, offering to settle. I, 32M, thought I knew the woman I was supposed to marry in 3 weeks. 2 years together, living together for 8 months, and I believed we were building something real. That illusion shattered the moment her lawyer's email hit my inbox at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. The subject line read, "Prenuptial agreement. Urgent. Review required." My stomach dropped before I even opened it. We discussed a prenup months ago, and she'd mentioned wanting something simple to protect her family's business interests. I'd agreed completely. Her family owned a successful restaurant chain, and I understood wanting to keep that separate. I wasn't marrying her for money. But this document wasn't simple protection. It was financial annihilation. The prenup demanded I waive all rights to marital property, including our shared home that we'd been paying the mortgage on together for 8 months. I would forfeit any claim to retirement accounts, investments, or business interests, even ones I'd contributed to during our relationship. Most insulting was the clause stating that in case of divorce, I would be responsible for her legal fees regardless of fault. The final kicker: I had 48 hours to sign or the wedding was off. I read it 3 times, each pass making my hands shake more. This wasn't protection. It was a humiliation ritual disguised as a legal document. I called her immediately. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice already defensive. I asked if she'd actually read what her lawyer had written. She insisted it was standard and that any reasonable person would sign without drama. When I tried explaining how one-sided it was, she cut me off, saying her lawyer knew what he was doing and that I was being paranoid. The conversation lasted 12 minutes. She hung up after telling me to think about what was really important. I spent the next day reviewing every line with a magnifying glass. The more I read, the angrier I became. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect. How could someone who claimed to love me ask me to sign away my basic rights? Wednesday evening, I texted her my decision. I told her I couldn't sign the prenup as written, but suggested we could work together on something fair for both of us. Her response came back within minutes. She wasn't interested in negotiations, and I had until Friday at 5 p.m. to sign the original document. Thursday morning brought another email from her lawyer, this one with an even more aggressive tone. He wrote that my hesitation showed I wasn't entering the marriage with pure intentions, and that his client deserved someone who would demonstrate their commitment without conditions. That's when something clicked. This wasn't about protecting her assets. This was a test, designed to see how much I'd degrade myself to marry her. The lawyer's email felt too personal, too coached. She'd probably fed him exactly what to write. Friday afternoon arrived, and my phone stayed silent. At 5:30 p.m., I texted her asking if we could talk. No response. At 7:15 p.m., she finally replied with a single text. My lawyer knew you weren't serious. Wedding's off. I stared at that message for a full minute. 2 years of my life, dismissed in 11 words. I typed back, interesting. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was heartbroken. Surprisingly, I felt relieved. But because I was furious about the money. Over the past 4 months, I'd paid for most of the wedding deposits myself. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, the florist, all non-refundable, all coming out of my savings account because she'd insisted on an expensive wedding that stretched my budget. Saturday morning, I started adding up the numbers. Venue deposit, $8,500. Catering, $12,000. Photography, $3,200. Flowers, $2,800. Bar service, $4,100. Musicians, $1,900. The list went on. Total, $38,750 of my money, all non-refundable, with less than 3 weeks' notice. She'd contributed exactly $1,200 toward her wedding dress. Monday morning, I called my cousin who'd just finished law school and passed the bar. I explained the situation, and he got quiet for a long moment before asking if I had documentation of all the payments. I did. Every receipt, every contract, every bank statement. He told me I had a solid case for recovering the deposits. When someone calls off a wedding, especially with such short notice and for unreasonable demands, The person who caused the cancellation could be held liable for the other party's financial losses. Tuesday, we filed the lawsuit. The papers were served Wednesday afternoon while she was at work. Her lawyer called my cousin by Friday, his voice noticeably different from the aggressive tone in his emails. The conversation, as my cousin related to me, was almost comical. Her lawyer started by insisting the prenup was standard and that I was being vindictive. My cousin calmly explained that his client had every right to refuse an unreasonable contract, and that calling off a wedding 3 weeks before the date because someone wouldn't sign away their basic rights constituted breach of promise. Her lawyer asked what I wanted. My cousin said the full amount of deposits paid, plus legal fees and court costs. There was a long pause before her lawyer said he'd need to discuss it with his client. The weekend passed quietly. Monday brought a second phone call, this one lasting over an hour. Her lawyer was offering to settle for half the amount. My cousin declined. Tuesday, the offer went up to 75%. Again, declined. Wednesday evening, she called me directly for the first time since the breakup text. Her voice was shaking as she asked why I was doing this to her. I reminded her that she was the one who called off the wedding over my refusal to sign an abusive contract. She insisted the prenup was reasonable and that I was being petty. I asked her a simple question. If the roles were reversed, and I demanded she sign a contract giving up all her rights while taking on additional financial liability, would she have signed it? The line went quiet for nearly 30 seconds before she hung up. Thursday morning brought the third settlement offer, full repayment of deposits, but I would cover my own legal fees. My cousin advised accepting. The legal fees were already close to $3,000, and going to trial would cost more with no guarantee of recovering those costs. But I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. This had become about more than money. This was about the principle that you can't humiliate someone and then expect them to quietly absorb the financial consequences when they refuse to be humiliated. I told my cousin to decline the offer. Friday afternoon, her lawyer called in a panic. They were offering full repayment plus my legal fees, totaling just over $42,000. The catch: I had to agree within 2 hours or they'd withdraw the offer and fight it in court. I asked my cousin what he thought our chances were at trial. He said probably 70-30 in our favor, but court dates were backed up for months, and her family had money for expensive lawyers. The smart move was to take the settlement. But then he mentioned something interesting. Her lawyer had let slip that this situation was causing problems with her family. Apparently, her parents hadn't known about the prenup's terms and were furious when they found out. Her father, who'd built his business on handshake deals and treating people fairly, was appalled that his daughter had tried to force me into such a one-sided agreement. That information changed everything. I told my cousin to accept the settlement. Update 1. The settlement was finalized the following Tuesday. $42,180 deposited into my account, covering every penny I'd spent plus legal fees. But the real satisfaction came from what my cousin learned during the final paperwork signing. Her lawyer, probably trying to save face, mentioned that his client had learned a valuable lesson about relationship communication. My cousin pressed him for details, and the story that emerged was better than any monetary settlement. After her parents found out about the prenup terms, they'd had what her lawyer diplomatically called a serious family discussion. Her father had apparently asked her point-blank if she'd lost her mind, trying to force someone who'd been paying for her wedding to sign away all their rights. Her mother had been even more direct, asking if this was how she'd learned to treat people who loved her. The family business aspect made it worse. Her father's restaurant success was built on fair dealing and reputation. Having his daughter's name associated with predatory legal tactics could damage relationships with suppliers, customers, and business partners. He'd essentially given her an ultimatum: fix this situation immediately or face consequences for potentially damaging the family business. The wedding venue, when they learned about the cancellation, had been surprisingly understanding. The event coordinator mentioned that they'd been in business for 15 years and had seen this exact scenario play out multiple times. Someone tries to use a prenup as a power play. It backfires, and the person who paid for everything gets stuck with the bills. They were glad to see someone actually fight back for once. But the story gets better. My cousin learned that her lawyer had been advising against the aggressive prenup language from the beginning. She'd insisted on the harshest possible terms, claiming that anyone who truly loved her would sign anything. Her lawyer had warned that the document was likely unenforceable and would probably cause the exact problems it ended up causing. She'd ignored his advice and demanded he write it exactly as she specified. Update 2. 3 weeks after the settlement, I ran into her sister at the grocery store. We'd always gotten along well, and I was curious about how the family was handling everything. The conversation was awkward but illuminating. Her sister apologized for what had happened, saying she'd tried to talk sense into her about the prenup but had been ignored. According to her, the whole family had been looking forward to the wedding and were shocked by the sudden cancellation. When they learned the real reason, the family dynamics had shifted significantly. Her parents had apparently staged something close to an intervention, pointing out that she'd sabotaged a relationship with someone who'd been generous, supportive, and committed. Her father had been particularly upset about the financial aspect, saying that trying to ruin someone financially while they were trying to marry you was both morally wrong and potentially illegal. The restaurant business had indeed been affected. 2 major suppliers had heard about the situation through mutual connections and had privately expressed concerns about the family's business practices. Her father had been forced to have several uncomfortable conversations explaining that his daughter's personal choices didn't reflect the company's values. Most interesting was what her sister revealed about her current situation. She'd apparently expected me to come crawling back after a few days, apologizing and agreeing to sign the prenup. When that didn't happen, and especially when the lawsuit was filed, she'd realized she'd miscalculated completely. Her sister mentioned that she'd been asking mutual friends about my dating life, clearly hoping I was miserable. When she learned I was actually doing well and had no interest in reconciliation, it had hit her hard. The financial settlement had been the final blow, forcing her to confront that her actions had real consequences. The sister asked if I'd ever consider talking to her. I said no politely but firmly. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. Update 3. 6 months later, I received an unexpected text from her. It was long, rambling, and clearly written after considerable thought. She apologized for the prenup situation, admitted she'd been wrong, and asked if we could meet for coffee to talk. I showed the message to my cousin, who immediately advised against any contact. From a legal perspective, the case was closed, but any communication could potentially create new complications. More importantly, he reminded me that people who try to manipulate you once will usually try again, just with different tactics. I thought about it for 2 days before responding with a simple message. I appreciated the apology, but I wasn't interested in revisiting the past. I wished her well and asked that she not contact me again. She respected that request, but I learned through mutual friends that the situation had changed her significantly. Apparently, losing a relationship and facing family disappointment over her behavior had forced her to examine her approach to relationships and conflict. Her family's business had recovered from the brief reputation concerns, but her role in it had changed. Her father had made it clear that someone who showed such poor judgment in personal matters couldn't be trusted with major business decisions. Her planned promotion to operations manager had been quietly shelved. The most satisfying detail came from a mutual friend who mentioned that she'd learned about the settlement amount through family gossip. The fact that I'd successfully sued her for more than $42,000 had apparently been a wake-up call about the real-world consequences of treating people badly. A year later, I'm in a much better place. The money from the settlement helped me put a down payment on my own house, and I'm dating someone who believes in partnership rather than power plays. Looking back, that prenup was actually a gift. It showed me exactly who I was dealing with before I made the biggest mistake of my life. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim and making sure actions have consequences. She wanted to see if I was serious about marrying her. Turns out, I was serious about a lot of things, including not letting someone financially abuse me and walk away without consequences. The whole experience taught me that love without respect isn't love at all. And respect means not asking someone to diminish themselves to prove their devotion. Anyone who truly loves you won't try to strip away your basic rights as a test of commitment. Her lawyer had been right about one thing. He did know I wasn't serious. I wasn't serious about accepting humiliation. I wasn't serious about letting someone walk all over me financially. And I definitely wasn't serious about marrying someone who viewed our relationship as a power struggle she needed to win. The best part? I never had to compromise my principles or stoop to her level. I just used the legal system exactly as it's designed to work, holding people accountable for their choices and protecting those who've been wronged. Clean, professional, and completely devastating.